There's three types of people who watch Star Wars. The first group, you watch it because your friends watch it. Your friends, your family, your loved ones, you're just here for the ride. The second group, you love the ride. You're here for the thrills, the chases, the fights, the laughs. Star Wars is a fun time and you're here to have fun for a good 2 hours. The third group of people are the people who love Star Wars. You can tell me how lightsabers are made. You can name starfighters, spaceships. If I asked you to name the political players of Star Wars Episode 1, you wouldn't miss a beat. Disney knows this. Disney is perfectly aware of how these groups work. And the truth is, most people tend to fall into a couple of these groups. Maybe you love the lore and the technical details of the setting, but you still love a movie even if it's largely character driven. Maybe you only watch it because your girlfriend watches it, but you secretly love those little mouse droids running around. People are not static. Disney's goal is to turn the first group, casual watchers, into the next two groups. They want to convert you into a fan because fans fill seats and fans spend money. Fans care. Disney has already done this with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, turning somewhat niche characters into absolute money makers through the power of accessible, fun movies. Everyone can watch the Avengers movies. Even if you don't like it, your best friend probably does, maybe your partner does, and your kids are already obsessed with Captain America. These movies weren't just movies, they were manufactured social moments for a massive amount of people. They were events, culturally. As we get farther and farther away from these massive culmination movies of entire franchises, billions of dollars really, it becomes harder and harder to really imagine if they're going to happen ever again. So in order to dissect what went wrong with Disney and Star Wars, let's go back to the beginning. We should talk about A New Hope. A New Hope is basically lightning in a bottle. It's a pretty simple story. It's cheesy, schlocky, full of tropes, quirks, and it is amazing. It is an absolute blast to watch. Lucas kept it pretty simple, drawing heavily from samurai, sci-fi, and even Western influences to create a nice layer of mystique over what would become the defining gimmick of Star Wars, the Force. It's a classic hero's journey. Everyone can watch it, everyone can like it, and everyone can fall in love with the raw charisma that the characters provide. Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Alec Guinness, all these actors just give such an amazing performance in terms of drawing audiences into their world. It's not just the setting that makes people like Star Wars, it's the way that the characters move within it. We would not be nearly as obsessed with the Millennium Falcon if Han Solo wasn't in the pilot seat showing us the way. The original Star Wars trilogy took people who were looking to have a fun time at the movies, aka Group 2, and turned them into Star Wars fans, which is Group 3. The MCU has a sort of a similar trick. They used movies like Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, and The Winter Soldier to make people care about their characters enough to see the big franchise super event movies. They took people dragged by their friends and family, aka Group 1, and converted them into Groups 2 and 3. Something to keep in mind here is that the plots of these movies are generally not the chief selling point. You can see this through the villains of the MCU. A lot of them are essentially stand-ins, forgettable and existing chiefly for the plot to move forward. Just because they cast a high-profile actor doesn't mean that they're engaging. People don't really watch for the story so much as they watch for the character interactions and the set pieces. Let's apply this to the Disney trilogy. By now, the MCU was in full swing, they're a couple phases in, they're probably feeling really good, so they've decided to reboot Star Wars. What do? The first step. Cast charismatic young actors who are willing to be the face of the franchise for years to come. Disney wanted more Chris Evans, more Scarlett Johanssons, more Robert Downey Jr.'s, faces of the franchise the way that the stars of the original trilogy were. So check, check, and check. These guys are all very good actors and they're prepared to hitch their careers to this particular horse. So what's the movie gonna be about anyway? Look, in my opinion, this movie is basically a remake of A New Hope, and it's kind of self-aware about it too in the way that a lot of MCU movies are. I don't like that, but it's fine, it works. The Force Awakens is not really about telling the most compelling story, it's about priming the fan base for more Star Wars for the next 10 to 20 years. It's about setting the tone. A massive consequence of this is that the world of Star Wars functionally cannot change so much from A New Hope. In A New Hope, blowing up Alderaan is sad because we see it on Leia's face. It's not actually referenced much more than that. In the grand scheme of things, all it does is establish who Leia is and give stakes to the story. They pulled the exact same trick in The Force Awakens. There's a giant evil laser beam, and instead of blowing up one planet, it blows up a bunch of planets, which is fine, theoretically. There's a giant evil gimmick, ignoring the fact that Alderaan blowing up kind of worked because Leia is from Alderaan, so we can get some emotional attachment to that. But fine, whatever. It establishes the stakes, it's okay. But the biggest problem I have with it is that it blows up the tiny bit of change that we had from the original trilogy. Okay, let's go back even further. Let's go back to the prequels. So a lot of people my age did not grow up with the original trilogy. We grew up instead with the prequel trilogy and all of its various spin-offs with the Clone Wars show, the Rebels, the Clone Wars animated series, and even this movie. This is a movie. All of this lends itself to a different version and vision of Star Wars. This is one where the galaxy feels big, it feels huge, populated by every single kind of alien civilization, all engaging with each other through war and trade and exchanging culture. Yes, it's simple, it's very simple. We literally have the Trade Federation and the Banking Clan, but that's kind of what made it work. It was reachable, it was comprehensible enough to love as world building, but it was still sophisticated enough that the thrill of discovery remained. It felt like George Lucas's world. We were just lucky enough to visit after hours and get to see it all. This is what I think Star Wars nerds really fell in love with. There's endless amounts of details in lore and character backgrounds and intersecting facts. You cannot get enough of this incredibly vast galaxy. Combine that with, the typical childhood to teenage hyperfixation on media, and you have a recipe for people who just love Star Wars. This is Group 3, the super fan. When I was a kid, this was me, by the way. I was absolutely one of the craziest Star Wars kids you're probably ever gonna see. It was an obsession for me, and I'll talk about that a little bit more and how it's changed. What Disney got wrong was not understanding what this group actually wanted. You see, after the prequels were released to mixed acclaim, there was an incredible amount of Star Wars content released through books, games, comics, essentially everything that isn't the silver screen. These mediums lended themselves towards expanding the galaxy, filling in gaps, introducing new concepts that really would be difficult to portray on screen. This is great for superfans. You have essentially several different time periods to pick and choose from to keep Star Wars feeling fresh. You have several different authors and creators working on different visions and projects, each with their own creative version of Star Wars. Everyone can have their own version of what they think Star Wars is. Me personally, as a kid, I was really into that Yuuzhan Vong stuff. This was like way after the original trilogy when Luke, Han, Leia, they all have like their own kids and their own different trials, being leaders in the galaxy. It felt like the logical progression of where the story should go. I felt like the story was moving. Not to mention, there's new threats, new spaceships, new aliens, new characters to love. I was getting more, which is great when you have an entire fan base of people who've watched the same movies probably tens, dozens, hundreds of times. I have friends who went the complete other way, playing the games taking place way before the prequels in the Old Republic, when everyone's favorite factions are at the height of their power. The stakes grew so massive, and the way that it filled out the lore and the spectacles and the world building, it was amazing for people who wanted just to know more about the Jedi, the Sith, the classic mystique of Star Wars being slowly peeled back so you can learn more. My question is, how do you go back from that? For me, I had begun to check out of Star Wars after The Force Awakens. I bore it no ill will, things changed. With the divisive nature of The Last Jedi and the ultimate failure of The Rise of Skywalker, it's hard to get invested in Star Wars at all. A lot of superfans like I used to be seem to have reached the same conclusion. I feel bad for those people. I think it sucks to lose something you love, but at this point, you just have to let it go. Everything you loved about Star Wars is still there. I mean, all those movies, those books, those Wikipedia articles, those games, they're all still there. Part of maturing, as I've realized a little bit painfully from being a kid, is, well, you just have to pick and choose from what you love sometimes. So let's be a little clearer here. How did Disney screw up? The core of the issue is that this is no longer the same population of people that watched the original trilogy. We know Star Wars now. The Force Awakens works as a clone of A New Hope, but it made people put all their expectations for the new stuff in the next movie. It almost brought up the hype even more in a way that Disney didn't want to deliver on. When a significant amount of your fan base is in that super fan territory and you don't really cater to them, they get a little mad. This is not a defense of toxic fandom. I personally think that getting mad over your favorite franchise, screwing up past the age of 16 is a little crazy, but Star Wars has been cultivating that super fandom for almost 20 years at that point, and to suddenly throw it all out of the window was gonna get some blowback. The Last Jedi worked and was made for people who don't necessarily watch or care too much about Star Wars lore, but more so about the movies. I personally think that it got the right lessons about the Force out of the first original trilogy, but it really did neglect the audience that was into it from the prequels. It is visually absolutely stunning, and well, it presents a lot of questions about the Jedi that people have been asking for years. Namely, are the Jedi as an institution worth bringing back? It uses a legacy character to ask this question somewhat forcefully, and that rubs people the wrong way, especially when they've been reading books about this character becoming the crazy Grand Master of the Jedi and the most powerful Force user of all time, and like basically Jesus. I'm not saying you need to cater to every single type of fan. The issue was, the expectation was set in the first movie of the reboot, and it was never really confronted until the illusion was broken. Is this Disney's fault? Is it the fans? Does it actually matter? All I can say is that this was a massive miscalculation on the part of Disney. People don't just watch your movie for the movie anymore, they watch it for the Star Wars. For now, I'm not really gonna watch any Star Wars, and the sad thing is, I'm okay with that. Thanks for watching. I was originally going to end this video right about here, but there's a significant amount of discussion regarding the Star Wars TV shows. And these are very interesting to me because they read as the corporate attempt to build the expanded universe canon of tons of different stories and stuff like that floating around. When executed correctly, this makes your universe feel big. It makes it feel vast, gives it breadth. When executed poorly, I feel like I'm just being set up for a movie and neither are going to be good. Nevertheless, it does seem like the general quality is improving as they bring in more creatively free people. And I might even tune into some of them as they go on. But thank you for watching. Leave a comment, leave a like. I'll see you next video.